What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and I'm back for another episode of Poker Hands. We're going to be looking at another heads-up hand played between Qui Nguyen and Gordon Vayo. Let's jump into the action.
And the blinds have gone up. 1.5 million for the small blind, 3 milli for the big, with a $500,000 chip ante.
Well, Gordon's fiance Kate works as a social media manager. Social media is a 24/7 type of situation, so I think she's used to a 24-hour situation as we go deep into the night here at the Rio.
I had a new pen and I just ran out of ink. That's how long we've been here.
This is a pretty significant jump from the previous blinds. It's 3 million in the big blind, 1.5 in the small, and a 500K ante. That means there's 5.5 million out there every single hand.
Call.
Our hand begins 36 blinds deep, so we're definitely getting a little bit shorter. Blinds have gone up. It's getting close to the end here, and Qui Nguyen decides to raise it up to 2.5 big blinds with Jack-9 suited. Definitely like this play, certainly the standard play. At this point, Vayo can elect between 3-betting or calling, but if you 3-bet ace-2 suited and get jammed on, you're in a tough spot, so he takes the correct option and flats. Let's see the flop.
And a deuce for Vayo. Bottom pair. One spade.
Check.
Vayo likes his flop. He's flopped a pair, hard to do, and he's got a 3 to make a straight, and also an ace makes 2 pair.
He took away the 100K chips.
Check.
Don't need those anymore.
The flop comes 5-4-2 rainbow, and these are actually some of the most interesting flops in poker because when the board has 3 low cards like this, even when you don't really get a piece, you kind of have a piece because if you have 2 overcards, you have almost a 1 in 4 shot of having top pair on the turn of the river, or at least maybe not top pair by the river, but a very strong pair by the river. So both players do flop a little something. Vayo flops bottom pair with a wheel draw, and Nguyen flops a backdoor flush draw. Vayo checks as he should with all of his hands, and now it's up to Nguyen, and I actually think Nguyen has a couple legitimate options here. I think in general I lean a little bit more towards betting. You force your opponent off their equity, you have the backdoor flush draw, you can improve to a good pair to barrel for value, but maybe he also thinks that he's been playing too aggressive and wants to tone his bluffs down a little bit. That said, if he wants to, why not pick a hand like Jack-9 with no backdoor flush draw as one of those hands that he's going to stop bluffing with? With this hand, you still have some playability across turns and rivers, and I think for that reason, I'd like to go ahead and bet the flop. However, he does check back. I can understand why you're trying to play some turns, and let's see the turn.
Check back. And there's a jack now. So
What
we win.
a surprise.
Hits the turn, takes the lead.
Check.
The red cards are hearts, not diamonds. Vayo's still getting no love even after the break. We win. Didn't even pay $10,000 for his main event entry, as we've talked about. Played in 3 different satellites.
That is 11.5.
Spent less than $3,000 to earn his seat. Did take him 3 tries.
So I think that Vayo is probably more likely to call here because it looks a little fishy, right? When check back the flop, we know he loves to bet top pair. We know he loves to bet second pair. And so does he have a jack? Well, that's really the only card he can have because we haven't seen him check back a big hand at all, not one time at this final table. So really the only hand he's representing is a jack.
Vayo wastes little time reaching for his chips. And there is the call.
The turn is the Jack of Hearts, which is a great turn for Nguyen. He now has top pair. And Vayo correctly checks over to his opponent. There's really not much of a reason to bet here with your bottom pair. If you get action, you're probably behind, unless he has maybe a hand like ace queen or ace 10. But otherwise, betting is just going to fold out hands that you have beat and not allow him room to bluff if he has a hand that you actually have beat. At this point, Nguyen goes ahead and bets his top pair, and I think he bets a relatively standard size. He decides to bet about 60 to 70% pot. So I like the size. Totally makes sense, and now this hand's actually pretty simple, I think, from Nguyen's perspective. If you do check back a hand like this on the flop, you're looking to maybe pick some turns that you can bluff on, and other turns where you can get there and, you know, bet. Like maybe you want to bluff at the turns of spade, you want to value bet at the turns like a jack or a 9, maybe on a turn ace or 3, you want to represent that you have an ace in your hand. So there's a lot of different ways you can play this hand in the turn, but when you get there, it's now very straightforward. Top pair is quite a strong hand. It heads up no limit. Back over to Vayo, I think he has a very clear check call. He could maybe argue for a check raise, thinking he has some equity and abilities to improve on the river, but at the same time, if you check raise here in the turn, you're going to get called when he has a jack, and if he's bluffing, he's going to fold. So the only real advantage to check raise here on the turn with a hand like ace-2 is maybe you knock him off his equity if he has a hand like queen-10, and you don't want him to realize his 12% equity on the river. That said, generally speaking in poker, when people have not very much equity, you usually want to keep them in the pot because that way they have more of a chance to bluff on later streets, and you might be able to realize more value with your strong hands. Anyway, Vayo calls, and let's take the river.
8 of clubs, inconsequential, and so Nguyen is best with his jacks here.
Check.
Resuming play at hand number 310 of this championship table.
I think Nguyen should definitely go for value, and if I'm sitting in Vayo's seat, I think this is a great spot to maybe consider turning my ace-deuce into a bluff.
That's actually a really good analysis from Antonio. I'm definitely behind check raising in this spot to put him in a tough spot.
Right, if Nguyen had 6-7, he'd probably bet the flop, so I'm not really worried about that. If he had a set or a 2 pair or something like that, he'd probably bet the flop. So really the only hand he can have here is a pair of jacks.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. Let's do this. This is some great analysis.
And so if I'm Vayo and I come over the top here to a river bet and put in a big raise, make it 50 million, something like that, I think it's incredibly difficult for Nguyen to call.
50 million's not exactly a huge raise, being less than pot and not even 3 times the bet. But yeah, I'm with you. Let's put this guy in a tough spot when he probably just has top pair.
I think this is a great spot to do it because I can easily represent the 6-7.
What?
Is that too narrow a range?
Yeah, I mean, really, you're only representing the 6-7, but...
And no, you're really not representing 6-7. Because if you have 6-7, you should be probing the turn so that you can value bet with hands like a jack or 2 pair, maybe some straights or sets, and also work on some bluffs like hearts or 6-7 or 8-6, double gutters, maybe even just a gut shot if you have a hand like 9-6, and you think your opponent mainly has bricked the turn. So you're not really ever going to have 7-6 here, and if you do check and face a bet, then you really need to check raise a hand like 7-6. You'll never win at showdown, and you don't want to check call hands out of position on the turn that you can't win at showdown. Then you only win by improving, and you need some ability to use fold equity in the pot. It could be okay to check 6-7 on the turn in Vayo's spot, but then you should be going for a check raise to put him in a tough spot, not a check call where his bluffs beat you. Here's a good general rule. If a check call loses to the bluffs, probably look to put in a different line there. Also, I don't know why he didn't mention ace-3 as the main check raise hand that we're talking about. Vayo can easily have ace-3 and have check called the turn as a trap, looking to get Nguyen to bet the river as a bluff or to put in more with a jack. So he can definitely have ace-3. He could certainly have a hand like 6-3 suited. He could have a hand like maybe a set, although a set probably I'm leaning more towards either betting or check raising the turn. But the point remains, he primarily represents ace-3 because ace-3 should be trapping his opponent when he's playing this aggressive. Let's see what happens.
But Nguyen could also give Vayo a credit for slow playing something else, maybe making jacks and 8s, maybe making 5s and 8s. And so I don't think that he would put him on making a move in this kind of spot. So personally, if I'm Vayo, I want to try and set the tone a little bit here. And I think this is a great spot to do it in. Now again, Vayo might think that his deuce is the best hand and just call. Really, the only hand that Nguyen is betting is a jack. But if I'm wrong, and he does actually have the jack, I like giving myself a chance to win. So this is one of those spots where, you know, all I'm saying is you should consider check raising and trying to represent.
You have to fight for the pots, don't you?
Right, because it's pretty clear that Nguyen either has a bluff or a pair of jacks, given that he checked back the flop, led the turn, and is now betting the river.
Gordon Vayo now with the calling chips in hand. Will they move forward? Doesn't look like he's going to check raise. Yeah, exactly. Not check raise here.
This is one of those moments where you want to call and be right and be a hero.
Did you see him take the hand off and rethink that?
So indeed, check raise doesn't appear to be an option for him.
Oh.
There is the call, and Nguyen will take it with the jack. And a chagrined Gordon Vayo once again has to throw away his cards, and that was big.
Nguyen bets $17.5 million, and now Vayo has a decision with his ace-2. If he thinks he's bluffing, he certainly could call here, trying to get him to bluff with a hand like queen 10, queen 9, some kind of air hand on the flop similar to jack 9 that hasn't hit the turn and is bluffing. But at the same time, I might counter with, what hands are you planning on not calling? Right? You need to have some hands that call turn to fold river. I'm not saying that's a great line, but you want to make sure to be putting hands into all the different lines in poker in order to most be able to play a strategy that works with all your hands. If you have a hand like ace high or a weak pair, yeah, it's okay to fold here. If you have a hand like a middle pair or a strong pair, yeah, go for the call. But if you're just going to call with every pair, it gets a little bit too dicey. Now, maybe what Vayo's thinking is that when he has ace-2, he doesn't block any of the bluffs, so his opponent's more likely to have a hand like queen 10 or queen 9, which is actually somewhat reasonable. But I really think we need to take it back to the check raise option. Your opponent is likely to have a jack and is unlikely to have very strong hands. I think if he does have a hand that is stronger than one pair, it's probably a hand like jack 8, which is not very likely considering all the hands he could have in this situation. You can certainly have 6-3 suited, ace-3 suited, maybe some sets, and possibly a hand like, 8-5 yourself, and you can check raise there for value, feeling very good that you're going to be up against top pair. So I don't see a reason that is bad for check raising here, and I think Vayo's size should actually just be all in. Put maximum pressure on your opponent. That's why I was a little surprised when Antonio said make a big raise, and I was with him. But the thing is, 50 million is not that big of a raise, really. You're not even raising to the full size of the pot. Why not just go all in? You know he's unlikely to have a hand like ace-3 or 6-3 himself. He mainly has a jack, and you're going to put him in a serious decision you're going to put him in a position to make a serious decision for half of his stack. If you want to win heads up, you can't be afraid to put the most pressure on your opponents you can in situations where they're unlikely to have strong hands. We often refer to it as being capped in a lot of spots, and sometimes people use that phrase too much. Like they think if you check back the flop, you can never have very strong hands. And there certainly are a few strong hands Qui Nguyen can have here, like jack 4 or jack 2, or maybe a slow played straight, or maybe a hand like jack 8. So there's a couple things to be afraid of. But in heads-up poker, you can't live in fear of the monsters in the closet. In general, Nguyen's either bluffing here or has a jack. And if he's betting too much, you can punish him by check raising him with hands like ace-2 so that he doesn't get thin value in spots like this, and he also ends up regretting having all these hands bet, and then he has to make a serious decision for a lot of his stack. So I guess my advice here would be don't be afraid to work in some check raise bluffs out of position, and that way you can also trap your good hands and go for some value. Happy hunting. Thank you for watching my video here today. If you enjoyed this episode of Poker Hands, click that subscribe button and join the team.